Hi everyone, I'm Troy Hunt and I'm here first of all to say a massive thank you for the Mary Litynski Award. This is not something that I expected. It was a very nice email to get. And after going through and making sure this was actually a real legitimate thing and it wasn't one of those weird ones that you get, which isn't really an award, I did actually get a bit excited. So thank you very much for that. I think particularly the last couple of years when so many of us have basically been stuck like I am at the moment at home, not able to actually go and see people, having some form of recognition is particularly poignant, much more so than what it was only a few short years ago. Because these days, everything that many of us do, certainly everything that I do, is like literally looking into the camera and I'm here on the keyboard. So to see something manifest itself into a real world recognition is sweeter than what it has ever been before. So again, thank you very much for the MAAWG Award. I thought I'd talk a little bit about what I've been doing and what I understand has helped me get this actual award. And of course, much of it is going to be about Have I Been Pwned? So let me sort of run you through a little bit of the background and how I think that has been impactful for people. So Have I Been Pwned, in case it's not something that you've seen before, is a data breach aggregation service. It literally answers the question, have I been pwned? Or owned or compromised or exposed? Basically, have I been in a data breach? I personally am up to 24 times. Now, this is not a competition, right? This is like golf. The lower number that you can get out of your pwnedness, the better. At the moment, there are 11.7 billion instances of someone having been pwned in a data breach in this service. And again, 24 of those are me. You're probably in there too, because if you had a Dropbox account or a LinkedIn account or an Adobe account, I started this with Adobe, you're probably in that list of 582 pwned websites at the time of recording. I started this back in 2013, and my thinking at the time was I didn't know that I personally was in the Adobe data breach. In fact, I was in the Adobe data breach twice. I was in there once with my personal account, once with my work account, and I didn't know that I was in there until I saw the data myself. And it surprised me because, first of all, I was in there twice. That was kind of surprising. But it also surprised me because I couldn't remember giving my data to Adobe. And what I learned later on was that the reason I was in the Adobe data breach on both those occasions was because I had been a big Macromedia Dreamweaver user back in the day. Adobe later bought Macromedia. My data now flowed to another entity that was, as far as I knew, not someone that had my personal information. And I got to thinking, like, if I didn't know this, how many other people wouldn't know this as well? So I launched it here, December 4th. I was excited because everyone's always excited if they create a pet project and they put it out there. And I thought a few of my mates will use this. It'll be good. You know, they'll use it. It'll be a bit of fun. I will learn a little bit about building software on the cloud, which was what I was starting to get into at the time. And maybe, just maybe, it will help one or two people. Not everyone was convinced. There were those out there who was like, oh, this funny sounding website with the funny sounding name could just be harvesting submitted email addresses. I actually thought it was a bit funny at the time because I had 150 plus million addresses in there, largely because of Adobe, and a very small handful of other breaches. I think there was about 5 or 6 breaches in total on day one. So it had very humble beginnings, and I never expected it to go anywhere. And I keep having these moments as I've gone through running this service where it's like, how did I get here? Like, how did it turn into what it is today? And the pinnacle of those moments came a few years ago when I ended up here, or there in US Congress. And that surprised me greatly. And I remember getting the call. They're like, hey, it's Congress. Would you like to come and testify in Washington, D.C.? And I sort of said to him, I was like, you know, I'm Australian, right? Like, are you really sure? And they're like, yeah, it'll be cool. Come over. It'll be fun. And it was. It was really, really interesting. And it was, I think for me, I think it's fair to say a career highlight to actually turn up in Congress. But it was also a really big thing to come from Australia, literally to the other side of the world to go to Congress. I had to get dressed up. Now, I literally live on a beach here in Australia. I have barely been away from the beach for the last 2 years. So for me to get the sort of as presentable as you see there, like the whole suit, tie, shirt, all this sort of thing, shoes, was a big deal. So I had to go out and buy every single item of clothing that you see me wearing there. But as you can probably gather from this video, like I don't like to take things too seriously. So I put out a tweet and I said, are there any InfoSec companies out there that would like to give me some socks, some fun socks that I could wear to Congress? And I got some, and I'm wearing them here. You can just see them under the table. I've got a zoomed in version. These socks were sent to me by Sophos, and they say, for those about to code, we salute you. And I thought that was a bit of fun to wear that to Congress. And I'm sitting there thinking, geez, I went from this like funny named website. Also good fun sitting there in Congress, talking to congressmen and congresswomen saying pwned. Like that went down real well. Like it actually went down real well. Everyone's super cool and I was so grateful that I'd gone from the other side of the world there. But I'm sitting there thinking, gee, it can't get any weirder than this. But it did. It got so weird that a reporter there took a photo of my socks and they're now available for sale on Shutterstock for $199. You can buy stock photos of my socks as an Australian sitting in Congress talking about pwned. Life got weird. A lot of what I've been trying to use Have I Been Pwned for is education, and particularly education around things like passwords. And I thought it'd be worthwhile just touching for a moment on where passwords have come from and then how I'm trying to use Have I Been Pwned to change our behaviors in the industry. And I like using this photo because this is MIT in the 60s, their compatible time-sharing system. And it's believed to be the first ever instance of a password on a computer system. And I like thinking back to this time 60 years ago, a simpler time. And I like thinking back to how did we use passwords? Now, I wasn't around in the 60s, so I'm speculating here, but I think this is a reasonable assumption. First of all, you had to have physical presence. So you had to turn up in this room of computer. When you got there, you had to have sophisticated knowledge. Like you had to know how to use this machine. I have no idea. Looking at it, I don't know, like is it tapes? I can see some tapes. Is it punch cards? How does it work? But what I do know is that passwords then would have worked fundamentally the same as they work today. And it's simply this. You have two strings in your head. One is a username, one is a password. And if they match the two strings in the system, you log on. And that was fine back in that simpler time. But that same premise, the two strings in your head matching the two in the system, still prevail through to today in an era where we have billions of people using passwords across millions of websites remotely, all over the internet with no sophisticated knowledge whatsoever. And things haven't scaled particularly well. Account takeover attacks, massive, massive problem. Credential stuffing, huge problem. A lot of it stemming from data breaches where you get credentials leaked from one service. Let's say the LinkedIn data breach. We've got 150 million odd passwords leaked out of LinkedIn, stored as SHA-1 hashes, cracked very, very easily, sitting next to email addresses. Attacker takes those and they're like, I wonder where else they'll work. And due to password reuse, account takeover happens. So Have I Been Pwned has a feature within it called Pwned Passwords, which is, as of today, many, many hundreds of millions of passwords from previous data breaches that organizations are now using to try and prevent further account takeover. And it works on the simple premise of if a password has been seen in a data breach before, it's at higher risk. Have I Been Pwned goes a little bit further as well and says, here's how many times it's been seen. Because there is a difference between a password being seen once before in a data breach and being seen 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times some passwords. You can probably guess what those passwords are. So I've really enjoyed making this service available freely to everyone to go and use and build into their own authentication schemes. But what's really, really blown me away, and this is particularly true of the last year, is the nature of the organizations that have reached out to provide support. And I think foremost among those is the FBI. So the FBI now feeds passwords into Have I Been Pwned, passwords that they come across during the course of their investigation. I just think it's so cool to have like an FBI logo out there when I'm talking about Have I Been Pwned. Because I got to be honest, like there was a period there in the early days where I'm like, if I'm ever involved in the FBI, with the FBI, as it relates to dealing with data breaches, I don't know if it's going to be in the good way. Now, I'd always tried to do the right thing, but the whole premise of Have I Been Pwned only existing because of a whole bunch of illegal activity, much of which the FBI does get involved in. I wouldn't have been surprised for a bit there if one day they had knocked on the door and went, are you sure you should have all this data? So to get to the point where they're now providing passwords into an ingestion pipeline so that I can make those available to other organizations, that's cool. That's super, super cool. It's even cooler than that, actually, because the ingestion pipeline that they're feeding this data into is all open source. So I open sourced the entire pwned passwords piece of Have I Been Pwned last year. The community rallied together. They built this code. The FBI feeds data in there. It's just like wins from top to bottom. Not least of which because being all open source, anybody else can now take all of that code, stand up their own on-prem or their own private cloud instance of pwned passwords, take the stuff the FBI feeds into, and then stop their customers from using known bad passwords. Not just the FBI either, also law enforcement agencies such as the NCA in the UK. They contributed 225 million additional passwords to Have I Been Pwned for its launch in December 2021. Actually, bad choice of terms. It was launched many years before that. The relaunch, the launch of the open sourced version. And those 225 million passwords have fed into a corpus of more than 600 million that you can now go and download. You can download this whole stash, take the open source code, run it all locally. It's just wins for I was going to say wins for everybody. But if you're someone out there trying to mount credential stuffing attacks, not so much a win for you because this is having a real impact on that. And we see this real impact via companies that do share figures about how many known bad passwords they're now blocking from their customers. And it's fantastic to see that feedback. One of the things I wanted to do with pwned passwords, and I guess Have I Been Pwned in general, is to make it as accessible as possible to people. How do we lower the barriers to entry? Because the more organizations that use this service and use this data, the bigger the positive impact we have on the industry. So there's an API. There is an online API that you can call to check whether a password has been compromised before or not. And I know that on the surface of it, that sounds a little bit flaky. It's like, hey, take your passwords that your customers are giving you and send them off to this funny name service run by this Aussie guy on the other side of the world. But there's a really cool anonymity model, and this came with support from Cloudflare. Cloudflare has been amazing in helping me run this service. And they created a great anonymity model where organizations can query this API without disclosing the actual passwords that they're looking for. What it means now is that when I look at my Cloudflare dashboard, for the last month, I can see 1.29 billion requests to this service. It's from organizations all over the world, all sorts of organizations. The cool thing is I don't even know who's actually using this because of the nature of the anonymity API. I'm actually doing some training this week for a fintech company, and they said, look, we use the API. And I went, do you? Oh, cool. I didn't know, but I'm really happy that it works well for you. And the other thing, getting my geek on just for a moment, of those 1.29 billion requests, 1.28 billion of those requests were cached. They were served from a Cloudflare edge node. And Cloudflare's got an edge node within 10 milliseconds of just about everybody. So it's super, super fast. It's anonymous. And again, it's wins from top to bottom. So wrapping up, I'm just really, really happy to see a project that was a pet project with no expectation of it going anywhere other than my mates, to see it actually do some good in the world, to see 3-letter acronym law enforcement agency logos next to Have I Been Pwned in the good way, not the way I thought it might work out, to see it get that reach, to see it make an impact on the industry. And as a result of that, not the goal, but as a side effect, a lovely side effect, to see awards like this, so that as I sit here in isolation, late into the night, plugging away at this stuff, I know that it's making a difference, and I know that people are appreciative of it. So thank you to MAAWG for the award. I appreciate that massively. And hopefully when I do manage to break free of Australian borders again, which is going to be in the very, very near future by the look of it, I'll be able to come and see a bunch of people that have supported myself and the project. Thank you very much, and thank you so much for the award.